So today we begin with this quote, which is from St. Clare. But embodied by. Okay. Our backbencher said embodied by Father Derek. Okay, so this is a quote from St. Clare to Agnes of Prague.
I think it's fine.
Oh, revelations happening in the room tonight. Okay, so today we're going to talk about we're going to really try to understand what this phrase is about. The phrase and the advice that St. Clare gives to Agnes is to gaze upon that mirror each day and continually study your face within it. So what mirror is she talking about? Okay, we will learn more as we go along.
The one with many powers.
Like Hollywood, is it?
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a lot of backbench jamming. Okay, so today we're just going to go through 3 parts of the chapter, which talks about identity, image, and then true identity. And this chapter is called Identity and Image. Was it image and identity?
Image and identity.
Image and identity. But we're going to go identity, image, identity. Okay. So we'll first go into the section on identity. So at the start of the chapter, Ilia Delio has a bit of an etymology moment where she talks a bit about some words that are the root word for person. So one is the Greek word, which you see at the top, which I'm not going to pronounce, which means mask. And the one below is in Latin, which I'm also not going to pronounce, which means to sound through. So to sound through. And both of these raise some questions for us about what identity might mean, or what it means to be a person, or your person, my person. What do I mean when I say me? And so we can maybe sit with these questions for a bit. Then we're going to have a Mentimeter. And then you're going to tell me what you thought about. Okay, so the 2 questions you can think about, and these don't necessarily need to be bad identities or like, oh, I'm trying to hide myself, so I've put on identities. It could be, but it doesn't need to be. And for the second one, I think it's difficult for us to just be the sole definer of our own lives. So you can, again, like, I don't think there's any shame in saying that like other people's voices also matter a lot to you or have shaped you into who you are. Okay, so with that, we're going to move to share. So you can scan the QR code. I have a feeling the moment I swap over to the actual Mentimeter, the QR code will like disappear from your screen. So maybe you take some time, you get 5 words. I think it's like 5 phrases. So if you want to put more words into it, you can. And they'll stay together if you put them in the same line. Yeah, so maybe we'll take like 5 minutes to do this. Has everyone in the room gotten a chance to scan? Yes? Yes, anyone else still scanning? Okay. So if you've yet to join if you didn't manage to scan the QR code, you can use the code at the top of the screen now. Oh, okay. One sec. I see your question, Maggie. I think the way you can do this is to go to menti.com and then use the code 59624137. So if you didn't manage to get the QR code or you couldn't scan it in time, you can go to menti.com and use the code 59624137. Wow. What is gila gila? What is gila gila mean? Yeah, what is gila gila? Huh?
Crazy.
Crazy. Oh, great. For it to like settle down. No. Push, slide. Yeah. Okay. Hmm. Oh, Aaron, menti.com. Go. Okay, we're waiting for Aaron.
Won't stress, huh?
Phone not working. Okay. All right. Maybe we can start taking a look through. Hi, Fergus. Yes. Yeah. So for people who are just joining us, you can just go on to menti.com and then put the code that's at the top. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's some different takes on how to answer this question. I think the most people have put in just adjectives, right? Describe yourself. I think some of them are like, quite positive, which is good. Should have a positive self-image. Some of them are a little like self-deprecating. Others have there's someone who I think, okay, I'm going out on a limb here, but I think the person who wrote my father's son and my grandfather's grandson is the same person. And I think that's a good, I mean, if you want to talk about who you are factually, then this is factually accurate. And also it demonstrates a bit about how like our identity isn't just about who we say we are, but also our relationship to people who have already existed before us and their influence on us. Or maybe you were just trying to make sure that you cannot be faulted for what you wrote down. So okay. Yeah, we also have some things that have to do with your state of life or things that you identify yourself with. I think if you ask this question in different places, you'll get like different kinds of answers. I think in some areas, people think more carefully about what identity markers they identify with, like your religious group, your racial group, your class. But I think it's really sweet that like right in the middle is beloved. Ooh, good job. Yeah, okay, yeah. Class dismissed. Good job. Goodbye. No, because I think that really demonstrates that hopefully that people didn't just, after the first person wrote it, that other people saw and they were like, yeah, that's me. And then added that into. I like this person who said they're swirling into God. I don't know if it's partially you're out of control, so you're just swirling into God. But also it's nice, like every action can be swirling into God. Is it the same person who wrote Gila Gila? No. Woo! Okay. Yeah. Let me see. Any others that jump out at me? Yeah. Also, there's someone who wrote Christified. I think that was cool too. Yeah. Okay. So it's good to know who we are. Work in progress. I think that's everyone lah. Work in progress lah. Yeah. Also sum of many parts. Also cooperator of my creation. Wow. Okay. Good stuff. All right. I'm going to put that aside and share back my page. One moment. Maybe I need to do this. Go back to here. Okay. Is this what I need to do? Does this work? Nope. Sorry. At some point, I will learn how to do this. Probably when I stop doing the sharing. Okay, great. Thank you for participating. Yeah, so I thought I'd bring it a little back to the Trinity, the Holy Trinity Sunday, which we just celebrated as well. So I think I partially kind of alluded to this already, right? That the human person isn't just how you define yourself, but it's also, I think, by its nature, relational, and based in relationship. And I think this, of course, comes from the fact that we're created in the image of God, and God is, in his being, relational. That's what we mean when we say God is love, rather than like God loves, right? Like love isn't a thing that God does. Love is a thing that God is. And it's because God is these three persons who love each other eternally. Yeah. Also, you'll see some like fun Easter eggs. So if I use your church's crucifix, woo, good job. We can play a quiz later about like which church is this from. Okay.
Yeah, like which is this from?
Which church is this from?
Not Singapore, right? St. Anthony.
Oh, you'll see. Have you celebrated a wedding there before? Is that what?
No.
No, but yeah, so I think this is St. Anthony's.
Then God the Father looks at Ignatius, sorry, Ignatius.
Hey, you remember?
No, no.
The image of Ignatius is
Oh dear.
very powerful.
No, Ignatius is so conformed to the image of God.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Crucified. Crucified. Yes. But I thought this was a nice crucifix to reflect on. Okay. Cool. Great. Okay, so now we're going to move to image. So we're just going to move super fast. Okay. Something you'll realize if you're reading the Ilya Delio book from last year and you're reading the one this year as well, is she kind of goes in like these broad circles. So in general, you'll start hearing the same themes again and again. Anyway, so we're going to move quickly through. So now we're going to go to image. So image meaning, who am I called to be? Okay, this one, like no one gets to answer this one, very obvious. Okay. But yeah, who am I called to be? I couldn't get a nice close-up of the crucifix, sadly. All right. So earlier I talked about the quote from St. Clare, right? And she wrote, and she said, gaze upon that mirror. And that mirror is not the mirror with the bulbs around it that illuminate your face so you can put your makeup properly. This mirror is Christ crucified. And in fact, I think it's this cross specifically, which is the one that's hanging in, that was hanging in her house. What is it called? Her convent, thank you.
Yeah.
The house where nuns are, where sisters are.
Monastery, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so she's asking us, and she was asking Agnes and she's asking us to contemplate the image in whom we are created. So if identity is like who I am now, or at least who I think I am, image is kind of what we're moving towards. And both in whose image we're created, so in the beginning, this is who God meant us to be, but also as we journey through life and as we journey back to him, what are we called to be? Who are we called to be? And St. Clare says that we're called to be this right here, the crucified Christ. Yeah. So in another part of the book, in another part of the chapter, look and see who you are, who you're called to be, so who you are, identity, who you're called to be, image, and where you have failed to love. Okay, this really called me out, so I'm just gonna put it here so it can call you out too. Yeah. And at first it's kind of a bit confusing, a bit of a weird thing to tack on there. But I think once you spend a bit of time sitting with the crucified Christ, which we're going to do later, it becomes very difficult to not, I think, make that comparison between what God is prepared to do for us and what we're prepared to do for God and for other people. Yeah, so we're gonna sit with this later. Okay, so we're coming to the third part. See, so fast. Which is now we're going to talk about true identity. So we talked about identity, who we think we are, and image, in whose image we're created, the image that God wants us to be. And now we talk about what does it mean to have true identity. Okay, so this is probably the one slide that has the most words on it. Okay, so true identity, I'm gonna close this image. So true identity is that creation of self through relationship with God and with others. We'll talk a bit more about with others later, but first of all, relationship with God. So we come back to this question that St. Francis poses to our Lord: who are you, O God, and who am I? Which is really the basis of kind of creating this co-creation of self, right? With God and in this relationship with God. So what St. Clare is inviting us to do is to gaze on this mirror of the cross and to contemplate Christ crucified, but also in turn kind of contemplating ourselves. And I think part of why it's difficult to sit with the cross as well is, I think because also Jesus is so laid bare on the cross, it kind of lays us bare too. And you're like, I don't regularly like try to think about myself or think about myself honestly. Yeah. And in this creation of self through relationship with God, Ilia Delio speaks about how St. Francis learned to be himself, whatever that self was, weak, limited, and also learned to accept others, and therefore be the person that God created him to be in relationship with others. I don't know which part of that speaks to you as a challenge. I know different parts at different times speak to me as a challenge, whether it's learning to be myself or it's learning to accept others, or it's to try to live this person that God has created me to be in relationship with others. So never just my sweet Jesus and me, but in relationship with others. And I think this contemplation is not just supposed to end there, not just supposed to, my 30 minutes with God. Okay, great, moving on with life. But the contemplation and transformation are intertwined. And so we contemplate in a sense the contemplation and the transformation are part of each other so that we can enflesh God, right? God came down as man in Jesus Christ, but now we are called to also participate in that, and to give Christ our flesh, and make him renewed again in the world. Okay, so all of that is just to say that this true identity is like a thing that we're working out with God, and God is working out with us, Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna come to the part of contemplation. So if you haven't gotten a donut yet and you feel like you're flagging, you need to get a donut now. Okay? Okay. Sorry, people online, you don't have a donut. But if you have a donut equivalent near you, you may now use the time to go and find that so that you will stay awake. Okay. Great. All right. So for everyone who is strong and doesn't need donuts, we're going to start with let's say, so this one, I've put like some helpful thing. Not everyone enjoys reflecting through writing, so that's fine. If that's not you, you don't have to do it. But only if it helps. You can use this time to also pen down. But what we're going to do first is to reflect on this. So the mirror, i.e. Christ crucified, calls us to accountability and to consider our behaviors. So St. Clare encourages us to consider, does the way we act in the world reflect, mirror, reflect the virtues of Christ, the humility, poverty, and charity of Christ? Okay, so maybe we'll take, how long can you sit in silence with the Lord? There's more later. Maybe we do 8 minutes first. Okay? Okay. I got 1 thumbs up from Jerry. So 8 minutes, okay? If this is not the image of the crucified Christ that you want, there's one here too. There's one on the wall over here. You can pull up an image that you prefer on your phone. But for the purposes of following St. Clare's advice, the team, we can use this one. Okay? All right, 8 minutes. Okay, and we're reflecting on the question on the right. And just use this time. I mean, if Jesus is leading you somewhere else, let yourself be led somewhere else. Okay? Thank you. Okay, don't worry, there's more. Okay, so thank you for trusting the process, for going on that journey. We're gonna go a little deeper. Which is we kind of took a look through actions, behaviors. But something else that I think the Lord is inviting us to go deeper into is on the level of our hearts and our desires, right? I'm not sure if this resonates with you, but I think for a long time I kind of had an idea that the desires that were in my heart were somehow like my creation, and then there were like some desires that God wanted to like put in my heart, which was like another thing that was like his idea. And so I had to like try to puzzle out what his idea was and then like transplant into my heart. But sometimes like I think over time I kind of grew to understand that like sometimes the desires, especially the desires that are like really kind of like the desires under the desires, you know, like there's the overall desire for like, you know, general, I don't know, I watch a lot of YouTube, so like, you know, general waste time on the internet, right? But actually all of that is kind of trying to look for something that will occupy my attention, or something that will like at the end help me to relax at the end of the day or something like that. And that piece is actually not in all the endless internet scrolling, but something deeper. Yeah, so we're going to kind of take a look at what lies in our hearts, what occupies our minds, and what inflames our soul's desires. Yeah, so for this one, actually, I find it useful, and maybe we can try this, which is instead of kind of trying to get your mind to like, okay, I'm going to think about what I desire now. I think it's sometimes revealing to notice where your mind's drifting to, and kind of like, instead of forcefully kind of like yanking it back into focus on the right thing, right? You can gently redirect it to like, okay, so I'm thinking about this now. God, what do you have to say about that? Or like, God, let me invite you into this space. And maybe that thing that you're drifting away to disappears, because maybe you're thinking about donuts. Right? So just then the donuts disappear. Or God reveals to you something deeper about donuts. I don't know. We wait and see what God can do, okay? So we're gonna take another maybe 5 minutes this time. 5 minutes, okay? And we're going to enter into that. So I think I tried to do this myself when I was preparing for this. And I think around this point I was kind of down. I was like, what? Because like looking at yourself is, especially when we spend so much of life like dealing with the external world, dealing with or coming face to face with who we are can be a little disheartening. So I think just a word of hope, or at least to me, this was like a word of hope, right? Which is that the God that's revealed in Christ is our image. So this is what we look like. We can look like. If we can gaze into the mirror and accept ourselves and our capacity to love. And to become like Christ is also to embrace those parts of ourselves where darkness still lives, in order to bring to them a vision of light and hope. Don't know how much of that rings true to you. But sometimes when we kind of pretend that like parts of ourselves don't really exist, then there's not really much avenue, because God respects our freedom, right? There's not much avenue for him to like come in and get to work. So sometimes we can sit with him and sit with ourselves, and bring those parts to him as well. Yeah. Also, this picture I took from the chapel. Yeah. Yeah, it's very beautiful. There's some reflection at the bottom. It's not light at the bottom, it's dark. Okay. So we're gonna do one final bit of contemplation. And I found such comfort in this line, and also like, wow, really me? Which is that from all eternity, God has desired each of us in a unique way to be his glory. What? To be his glory and to be his eternal human face. And he desires to incarnate himself anew in our lives. So when we make space for God to dwell in our lives, we can discover who we really are. And God's delight in us. Isn't that great? Discover God's delight in us. In this continuing act of incarnation that he is inviting us. Yeah. So it's not really to like discover who we are and be like, oh, I suck. But to also discover that God delights in us. And God wants to continue to delight in us. Yeah, so we can enter into that joy as well. So maybe as we close this section of contemplation, we can reflect a bit about how you could make space for God tomorrow in your life, or you can discover God's delight in you. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to take another 5 minutes for that. You can guess where this. Okay, no. This is the last, like the last paragraph of the chapter. And I only pulled some lines from it. I thought it was, again, good reminder that in the mirror of the cross we discover what it truly means to be loved by someone greater than ourselves. And also that we're somehow mysteriously participating in this, in the cross, but also participating in what Jesus still wants to do in the world, what God still wants to do in the world. So that the mystery of Christ is our mystery, and his image is our image, and his life is our life, and our life is his life. And that this is what we're created for, to be the glory of God, and also to show in our unique ways and through our unique persons the power of God. It's become more ourselves, but also more like God, and those two things are the same thing. So I'm gonna open up for sharing, and I included this whole section here because I wanted to like convince everyone to share more vulnerably, because it's hard to share. I know it's hard to share, especially when you have like real deep feels and deep truths, but they're painful. So I just thought I'd share some parts from the chapter which talked about how, so remember I talked about how creating this true identity is a creation in a relationship with God and also in a relationship with other people. So this is where indirectly the book really makes a plug for FYA, where it says Clare's path is a true relationship with God, but also a true relationship with our neighbors. And so this creation of our identity, of who we are, and who we're called to be, takes place in the context of community. And that this fullness of being in relationship with God is also being in relationship with God who has revealed himself, not just through the community of persons that he is, the Trinity, but also in the community, the body of Christ, and in communities of people. And so prayer without community cannot lead to the fullness of our self-identity, because it is in community that the mirror of identity, of our identity, is reflected in the other. And it is in loving our neighbor with compassion that we become more ourselves, and in becoming more ourselves, we become like Christ. I think there are things that we can't learn about ourselves without living with other people, and those interactions revealing to us parts of ourselves that we wouldn't see if it was just us and our sweet Jesus. And I think it can be challenging sometimes to live that community life, especially to live community life with the community that you're most used to, whether that's like your family or friends that you've had for a really long time. Where it seems like sometimes they are looking at you and you feel like, are you really looking at me, or are you seeing like some me that was 10 years ago, or some me that is in your head and not, but yet like there may be some truths in that we're not ready to face up to or to confront. And so I think this time of sharing, I know that we're probably not going to be sharing in our groups, so I know that it's like scary, new people. But I think it'd be good if we broke up into the smaller groups, and then we tried to keep that space sacred. And just, I guess, be ready to see the person for who they are and what they're trying to share. There's no need to like go probing each other for like more details. But just invite us to be open to share. At least one thing, maybe. Yeah. So I'll show you guys the sharing questions for today. So the questions, the 1, 2, 3, 4 questions are from the book. So you can refer to it there. But just to quickly run through, how did you relate to the cross of Jesus Christ? Did you view it as a place of guilt and judgment, or of conversion and freedom? Can also share a bit about how the time of gazing upon the mirror that is Jesus was for you. The second question about how the cross can become your daily mirror. Okay. How do you relate to others in this way, and how do relationships help you to reflect on your own life? And finally, do you see yourself as a mirror of Christ for others to follow as well? Yeah, so no need to go into all questions unless you feel like you've got time and you want to go a bit deeper. But whichever question starts the conversation going, then we can go from there. Yeah,